I believe that tariffs are necessary.
Mr. John Anker,
Give us the scoop.
We founded Ankerpak out of desperation.
you were in your own vehicle, driving around, begging them to let you manufacture and figuring out how to operate the process.
I'd borrowed money already, refinanced my house. Now, any Uniball pen that you buy in America, Mexico, or Canada comes through Columbus, Georgia.
It's one thing to build a business. It's an entirely different thing to have to rebuild it from the ground up when everything changes. And that's exactly what our next guest, John Anker, did. What started as a small packaging business here in Columbus, Georgia, has evolved into a manufacturing and logistics engine. Not because of a 10-year plan, but because when others left, John stayed. When big names pulled out, John trained his team to replace them. A partner for growing brands and a reflection of John's values that you can be doing good in business while also doing good for others. This is a story about resilience, resourcefulness, and how building a business can not only lift you up, but bring others up with you. Let's dive into our full conversation with John Anker.
All right, Mr. John Anker. Well, first of all, I want to just say thank you very much for doing this, for taking the time to come and sit down with us and give us a shot here at trying to have a conversation with business owners and talk about how businesses run. So I definitely want to say thank you for that. We're upstairs at Iron Bank, so if you hear any kind of noise in the background, that's what it is. So apologies
Cool
in advance.
It's commerce.
But yeah, if you let's take it back to the start, if we could. So obviously you're with Ankerpak, is the business that you run. Where were you at before that? What were you doing before that?
I almost knew to the month how long ago it was, but it was just over 21 years ago when my wife and I decided together, because you have to do it with your wife, right? I mean, I couldn't go do it on my own.
Yeah.
I quit my job. I had 2 young kids, and I wanted to go try it on my own. So where I was at that moment, I was in a moment of real, I say desperation. We founded Ankerpak out of desperation because maybe I was a little idealistic, but I'd also worked for a couple of different bosses who it was very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
And so it just came to an inflection point on a December 5th, 21 years ago, and my wife hugged me, and I got in my car with my blue jeans on to go tell my former boss that today was my last day.
Wow.
And then we started from there. I'd borrowed money already, refinanced my house.
Wow.
I took what I only had 8 years left to pay off on my house and put it back on a 30-year mortgage, took out $60,000 out of the equity.
Wow.
Put it in a savings account. My wife said, you got $60,000 to go do your payroll, do what you want to do, go spend it how you want to, or 6 months. And whichever one runs out first, if we're not getting cash flow to live off of, you got to go back to work.
Right.
And that was the idea
motivating
behind
factor.
Doing it. But it was started with desperation from really what I thought was not the right way to run business.
So you didn't always see yourself as being in business for yourself? Would you have been, if things worked out differently, would you have been content to work for somebody else?
I think I could have been content. I had always been successful in sales. That was an area that I didn't set out to be in,
right.
But it was an area that I ended up really enjoying and financially being rewarded for. And I think when you're in sales, you're in business to meet a need. You have
right.
clients in your financial wealth management group. They come in and you're listening more than you're selling.
That's exactly right.
And so when you're listening to clients and they're needing solutions and you're trying to sell a product, they need that product, but that's not their biggest issue. The biggest issue is the rest of the solution.
Right.
So, I started out trying to just create solutions, and that's what drove me into, I could have been happy working for somebody the rest of my life, but I was a dreamer, and I am a dreamer, and I thought I could do it. And I thought there was enough needs in the marketplace. And fortunately, at the moment, my wife was willing to take the risk with me. And I say that because that was really the pivot point, is when she said, okay, I see, you're a dreamer, you want to do this. She'd been scared for a long time. I was 33 years old.
Yeah.
You probably started at a much younger age.
We did start,
23, 24, 23, something like that.
Okay.
But we didn't have kids, so it was a different kind of environment.
I had one.
Well, you had one. I didn't have any kids. Yeah. So it was a little bit of it was a risk, obviously, because you're leaving comfort and you're leaving a 401k and you're leaving health insurance and you're getting none of that when you go off on your own. But for me, I felt like the risk was greater to stay there and do that, which I didn't really enjoy. It wasn't
the vision, the dream.
Yeah.
You take that asymmetric risk reward. It's like,
that's
okay,
right.
if it doesn't work out, I can get sit back a little. I go back and get a
That's
job.
right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
You can't.
It's always there.
I hate to say it like this, but back then you were a little baby. You fall and skin your knees. I mean, you're just going to put a little Band-Aid on it, keep running.
Yeah.
You know, I got a memory just popped in my mind. When I quit my job, the most amount of money my wife and I made in that first 6 months. Number one, she went back to work at Calvary.
Okay.
And she was a kindergarten teacher next to your mother.
Okay.
In the same building, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so and our kids went to school there, and it wasn't the pay that was the most money we made in 6 months. It was the tuition. But the second most money we made was we had a Brittany Spaniel. And we bred that dog, and that dog had 13 puppies. You know, you got to be creative when you're in business.
Yeah.
And that was my wife's contribution to the founding of Ankerpak.
We call that diversification of income, I think.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Isn't that something? And the kids, too, because there is an element when either you're about to start a family or if you have started a family, and this has been a kind of a recurring theme in our discussion with other entrepreneurs, is those little kids, it gives you a drive.
Yeah.
You know, you're really going to leave it all on the field. And that's a big motivating factor.
Tell you what gives you drive, too, is I think, I say this, and I hope I'm not saying it wrong. It's off the cuff, but, you know, a wife will forgive a man for a lot of things, but don't drive the babies and the wife to homelessness with the money, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's a lot of drive to succeed, too.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's good to have that support structure with the spouse on board.
It's absolutely necessary.
Even though when's the paychecks coming?
Yeah.
How are you paid again?
Are you married?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, 3 kids now, and you know, those were early questions like, okay, so
when is it coming?
Yeah, it's been how long?
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that drive, because that drive, you know, particularly in your instance, really played a large part early on, because you were literally pounding the pavement. You were in your own vehicle, driving around to companies, begging them to let you manufacture and figuring out how to operate the process. So was that something that was born out of necessity, or did you have a plan to say, hey, these are the kinds of businesses I want to go after because I know I could do it? Or was it like, let me talk to you, and based on what you need, I can do it, whatever it is?
No, I guess I had an ideal, I had a dream, I had a somewhat of a pitch, but It was a general pitch, and it was all about solutions in the supply chain of packaging. And so from the drive question, you know, it did make me go and look hard in the corners of people's buildings. So the drive was I had, you know, financial needs just to survive. I had a wife and 2 kids that were in private school, raking by on borrowed money. And so that was a lot of driving itself. But also when I go to see a customer and I walk through the facility, I'd say, hey, what's your biggest problem? Where are the areas that nobody's helping you? What, you know, and I'd walk through, I remember walking through a plant here in Columbus. It was called Weyerhaeuser back then, a big industrial plant. Most citizens don't even know they're here, and they're still here today manufacturing corrugated boxes. Wow. They have no customers in this town. They ship everything out of town. They've been here a long time. And I was walking through there, and a guy named David, I said, hey, what's that machine over there? He said, don't look at that. He said, that's a thorn in my side. My maintenance guys live over there. It costs too much money to keep it running, but I got a great customer who's forcing me to run that machine for him and do it. And I said, well, who's that? He said, Charbroil. And he said, we run, 15 truckloads a day for Charbroil. And he said, but we got to run that because the customer tells us to. And I said, well, give it to me. I'll do it. You don't remember, you're too young for this, but the old Life commercial. Give it to Mikey. Mikey will eat anything. Yeah. And then he starts eating it, and Mikey likes it. Yeah. And I was I'd take the things that nobody else wanted. So that guy, David, gave me that machine. That was a little bit of the drive that I'm talking about. I'd ask for the problems because I knew if I could help him. I knew the other areas I wanted to help him in, and it was a big wall. He wouldn't even look at it. He wouldn't even talk about it. But if I could help him in that area, and he was so nervous too, and he said, John, I'm going to give you that opportunity, but I'm going to run up 4 truckloads of that stuff just to make sure when I move that machine over to your plant and you can't run it, I'm not going to shut my customer down. So he ran up all 4 truckloads. He sent the machine over. We bolted in, hooked it up, started doing training, getting it running. We had it running. He hadn't even shipped the first of his 4. We had to shut it down. Yeah, that's drive, and in one, I could tell you 100 other stories of how we did it like that. Drive is important.
That's interesting, though, because you hit on something that not a lot of business owners are comfortable with, at least in my experience, when they ask or when they think that they have to get to a point where they have enough of it figured out to even sort of get off of start, when the simplest thing to do is just ask questions. Like, be open about it. Right. Like, if you don't know, just ask. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people feel like, I can't do that because then I'm going to kind of reveal myself a little bit that I don't know, right. exactly what's going on. But that's okay. Like, you don't have to.
It is okay. I love to ask questions. I actually think it's real important. Your kids, your 3 kids, teach them to ask questions. That's a great way to be a good friend. Right. Asking questions. I think if you can be really good at asking the right questions, you can really lead towards the solutions and help the person. Nobody likes to be helped more than you asking the right questions, and they came up with the answer and the solution for themselves all by themselves.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have to tell the guy I want to do that. That guy David, when I said, "What's that machine over there?" "Oh, don't look at that." And if I said, "Well, what if?" and you did this and you did that, and it was his idea, all of a sudden he's moving the machine for me, giving me the keys to it, and I'm running it for him.
Yeah.
So I think asking questions is really critical. The other part of the drive is, and I think this is important when we talk about our kids, our business, just the work ethic. I mean, yes. You're the first person in every morning. You're the last person out. You're the last person that signs a check. You turn the lights off. You're the last person that the bank calls for whatever they need from you. You're always the guy on the line. And if you haven't grown up working, as a man, I feel like that, especially for us men, we have to have that instilled in us in an early childhood. Yeah. And I hope we're teaching our kids that kind of work ethic. And when it gets hard, you just keep pushing through, getting up every morning, showing up on time. That's one consistency that my daddy taught me, and I'm really proud that he instilled that in me.
Yeah, it's a core value. That's another recurring theme we keep hearing is tenacity, drive, and it's especially in the early days, it's going to be ugly. And you're going to have difficult times throughout your career. Mm-hmm. But yes, getting up and having that same drive and passion that you first had when you started the business, and you are going to be doing, especially when you're starting, every job that there is to do, and you are going to be the first in, last out, the first to write the check, the last to get paid. I think that's a core value that we have to teach the younger generation, because especially with social media and with so much gaming and the gamification of education, everything is like instant gratification, it's getting that dopamine hit. And those that can really grasp onto what it means to be persistent and to push through even when it doesn't feel good, those are going to be the ones that really outcompete. They're going to be the next generation of the super successful people.
Yeah, my favorite word, you say persistent. I love persistence. My favorite word, my kids will tell you, if I ask them, or you go and ask them, what's your favorite word? They'll say, well, my daddy told me. and I think they've learned, too, consistency. So if you can instill some of those while you're teaching those good principles and the persistence and the hard push, but also that consistency. You can build on even the slowest man in the race. I like the story a lot about the turtle and the hare. Which one won? It was the turtle. And, he was consistent. He just never stopped. And the hare would run real fast, get ahead, and stop and sleep. Thought he could.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That's true. I've known a lot of people to be the hare. Right. But being the turtle is the payoff. Because if we're going to risk what we're going to risk to do what we do, we want the payoff at some point, right? You want the benefit and the quality of life and the values that you chase after. So,
I think in another story, just a personal experience about that persistence and consistency. I mean, small business is hard, and you might fail. And my daddy always taught me that, bad people succeed greatly sometimes, and good people go out of business every day. And I wake up with a little bit of fear every day that I'm going to go out of business. Yes. I'm sure you do. You never know what the market's
when you were talking about consistency in the back of my mind, and we had conversations. We did a lunch and learn at one of the small business here about retirement accounts, and I shared with them because they were asking like, well, what keeps you motivated? And I said, well, I'm a little different. I think differently, but to me, fear is probably one of the greatest motivators. It's not necessarily a healthy thing for some people to mentally they can't take it, but I've never gotten rid of the fear of failure. no matter how many clients you get or how successful you think you are. And that's because for me personally, it always keeps you sharp and it keeps you focused on the next thing. Because again, if we're going to have this risk reward, if we're going to risk what we did to create something, I want that drive.
You better have that.
So fear is a great, we can get biblical about it, right? The fear, fear is a great motivator.
Fly joining our conversation here.
Yeah, in the right way. It doesn't mean you can't be scared. You can't be scared where you don't make decisions, but the fear of missing out in business and the fear of not doing everything that you can or to be the best that you can be. And just to add to that, I remember one of the earliest conferences we went to in Denver more than 10 years ago. We had some really good early success doing what we did. And we walked into a room and ended up at a round table with some really successful guys. And I just realized that, I always want to be the dumbest person in the room, and I want to see how small I really am so that I can learn. And that really helped us make some important decisions in the early years, was surrounding ourselves with people that are way more successful than us, way smarter, and that's okay. And so, backing all that into the fear is in healthy doses.
That's right.
I think is
that's
really
what all
important.
of this is about, because you can learn it in sort of a sterile educational type environment, or you can read books about it. But the entrepreneurship story and the story of small business is really getting your hands dirty, figuring out where the work is, what the work looks like, how many hours the work is. If you're going to leave a 40-hour job, you're probably going to work 80 hours a week on a small business. If that, maybe that's conservative. Maybe you work more than that. But for you, example, tell me a little bit about the Goody Hair product story. I think that story is so awesome.
You must have been looking up something on our website.
I read as much as I could about you. I definitely did.
There's an NPR article where Kai Risdall came all the way from California.
Okay.
He, just like you two guys, except he's pretty much worldwide.
Right, yeah. Well, we're not there yet, but maybe one day.
And he had his guy with a boom microphone, and he followed me around for several hours interviewing me, and he whittled it all down to that 8-minute article about bobby pins.
Okay.
But again, I was chasing. I was persistent. I was consistent, trying to work and trying to grow in manufacturing. So in small business, like you were talking about with fear, if you don't have a healthy dose of that, you're soon to be backing up.
Yeah.
And because you always got to be climbing a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say it's like a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it. You got to be putting more water in the top of the bucket, because there's water always coming out of the bottom. And when NAFTA really started to kick in for our town here in Columbus, Georgia, it decimated our industrial base. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can name 25 textile companies that were here when I moved to this town that are gone. And the legends, the worldwide legends that that are from this town that affected the globe on, say, denim manufacturing.
Right.
And then in our town and in our area was also the Goody Hair products. And it took a while from after the textiles left for the rest of the industrial base to start to dwindle down. And I would say from bad trade practices with south of the border through NAFTA with China for the last 40 years. And China beat up a lot of those industries. So when they announced they were moving to China, I ran to the storm. I ran to the fire.
Literally.
I ran to the boat that was sinking, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I said, what can I do? They said, John, nothing. It's all going to China. It's already been decided. We already told all the employees no. I said, well, walk me through the facility. And I said, how about that? How about that? No. And, it was a death cloud over 800 employees in Manchester. They had a plant, they had a distribution center here in Columbus, Georgia, but the manufacturing was in Manchester, Georgia. And so they said no. And then they called back and said, hey, John, we might have a small opportunity. And, it's got a little hair on it, but we think you can do it. And so I went in there, and the guy said, hey, John, man, you can hide a multitude of sins with volume, and this bobby pins has a lot of volume. So the long story short is I was awarded the business. And in that first year, that amount of volume, I didn't even know how much steel we were wasting through scrap and waste, and then labor and overtime. And so you can also expose a multitude of sins through a lot of volume. And so I immediately was upside down in cash flow, $300,000 worth of steel for bobby pins. We made 5,000 pins a minute. In 2006, I think it was, we sold over $3 million worth of just a little bobby pin for half a penny each. So steel was the majority. It's a lot of bobby pins. We were the largest bobby pin manufacturer in the United States and second largest in our country. I mean, in the globe. And I went and met the largest in China. He's been to our facility 3 times, and he's a great capitalist. But that was the beginning of our manufacturing segment. And we did that because our contract packaging all our customers kept leaving town. We had West Point Stevens. We had Goody Hair Products. We had all the different customers that were vacating our region.
And I think West Point Stevens, that was either the number 1 or number 2 largest textile group
in this region.
Yeah.
In this region. And you know, they were making sheet set. We were assembling and kitting sheet sets for the manufacturing facility, pillowcases and fitted sheets and cover sheets for them.
What do you see just kind of in the current events environment that we're in, tariffs and such? Give us the positive, because you know everybody gets the negative from the media. So give us kind of the positive from being in manufacturing. What are you seeing as the most likely outcome for manufacturing?
Great question. Yeah, I wish I had a lot of hope that this was going to lead to an industrial revolution, so to speak, in America. I think it will lead to some positive outcomes in our industrial base. We cannot lose any more industrial base in America, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we'll always see customers close down or move to Asia or move to Mexico or somewhere else in the globe. But I think we have to keep growing that industrial base if we're going to continue to be a well-balanced nation that's not just services and restaurants. And so I think there are some positive outcomes, but I am unsure. You know, when I started Ankerpak, I said, what if you could outsource to an American company at the same price as an overseas provider? I still have that plaque. It's still our motto. You can still find it on our website. I still believe it. Yep. And I'm still offering a service in the supply chain that meets that need. So I'm proud of that, but I don't feel like any business is going to come back to Ankerpak from China. I think a lot of those are going into alternative locations. But so I view the tariffs not as an industrial base increaser. I view the tariffs as a way to help offset some of our expenses and our cost for American government.
Right.
And to relieve the future tax increases on businesses that are trying to survive. Yep. I mean, you guys are wealth managers. You know the effects of trying to create something and incent somebody to go take a risk to do and to make a profit and to invest it back in their company. So we got to have good policy that incents that.
Yeah.
And even at a local base, we got to have enough businesses paying their fair share of taxes. We don't need less businesses, which we have today, paying more taxes, which we have today in a hostile environment that's not well run.
Yeah.
So that you know, I'm getting a little bit off, but I think tariffs can have a positive effect overall with the good balance of economy. And it can't be too much, can't be too little. We don't have to talk about politics and Trump and, you know, his negotiating methods. But I believe that tariffs are necessary. And I will tell you that, you know, in the early 1900s, we didn't have an income tax.
Yeah.
You know, and Alexander Hamilton was middle of the line libertarian while they were writing the Constitution, or not during the Constitution, but he said, we need global trade always, but we need to import bulk items and add value to it. You talked about adding value earlier, value add. And we always need to be able to export. So we need to trade. We don't need free trade. We need fair trade.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't need to embolden our enemies.
Yeah.
So that's what I believe in. It's not even the area that I'm growing in because I've lost so much business.
Well, we view it too as, especially in what we do, we need a healthy group of younger working savers to replenish, you know, the baby boomers that are aging. And so, you know, one thing that we've talked about is I would gladly pay, you know, a few dollars extra or even 10% more for a car so that, you know, my neighbors and people in the community can have jobs and save in their 401k and be a future client of the firm. And, of course, we mentioned West Point Stevens, and we have Kia that's come to West Point with a lot of the supply chain with Hyundai and Kia. And so I like to see it, and I think you're probably spot on. Obviously, you have in-depth knowledge on the topic, but I think
only have my experience.
The stabilizing the industrial base and then trying to add to it as we can. I think it's going to be a messy process, but
it is going to be a little messy. We've got some pain to go through. Yeah, I'm wearing. I like like you said. I like your New Balance shoes. These are made in America. New Balance shoes.
I think these were either UK or USA for this one.
So I try to look and buy those, and it means something to me.
Yeah.
And somebody might say, "Why are you wearing those old-fashioned New Balances?" Because they're made in America, baby.
Yeah. They do. UK and America, and I'll just add just real quick before we move on. My wife had a small manufacturing business. We've talked about it on the podcast before, and much smaller scale, but we experienced even in that small scale how the unfair trade practices make it virtually impossible to compete. Virtually impossible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
of, and it affects everybody too.
I hope we come back to something you mentioned, and that's the future of America and the baby boomers coming out and the future leaders coming up. I hope we come back to that sometime.
We will circle back.
Let's talk about it.
Let's do it now.
Talk about it now.
Yeah.
You got, do you see, you kind of are in a unique position because you kind of have a little bit of the government experience also with the private sector. So when you look at, in the conversation of tariffs and manufacturing and everything else, Columbus used to be a powerhouse for that. Do you see at all a way that, maybe not next year, but maybe in the future, Columbus starts to see an influx? I know there's been some rumors of things that, they've looked at with senators recommending Columbus for certain things, but, is it ever actually going to come to fruition? I think everybody's kind of wondering that. Is that something we could sustain? Is it something that could sustain Columbus actually?
Well,
give us the scoop.
Yeah,
411. We'll take notes.
It definitely could sustain Columbus. I mean, you kind of touched on some stuff, but the big talking points are maybe the Chips for Chips program.
Right.
Trying to get a big manufacturer from Taiwan or somebody to come here, or maybe it's a second or third tier manufacturer. I mean, we got a lot of assets that would be really helpful for, and that would help sustain Columbus with tax base and more small businesses feeding those type people. You got Fort Benning, who's just a wonderful asset for our Army and our armed services. And so you got all these assets here. And the other thing I think people overlook is we were an industrial-based town, and we said, well, we can retrain everybody, put them in high-tech jobs, but really what I see that led Columbus to was a higher poverty rate. People did go to college, and they went to tech schools, but they got out. There really weren't the jobs that interested them. And so I personally think that manufacturing is fun and can be good. And a lot of people like to talk about good and paint a picture of high-tech manufacturing. That would be Chips for Chips. But I'm an entry-level manufacturer.
Right.
But even some of our manufacturing operators, make $18, $19, $20 an hour and more. And we brought up people that were making $8 an hour who are now plant managers. And so that kind of influx doesn't only help from a tax base, and it helps a rising tide for our city and our expenses to go build the new jail we were just talking about. But it helps.
It'll be a very nice jail.
Yeah, but it helps individuals. It helps raise up. And if people have, and we talk about consistency, if people are going to work every single day with what I call a family, a work family.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I probably spend more time with my general manager at Ankerpak because we've worked together for so many years than I spend with my wife.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say that because I respect him. I like him. He's helped build Ankerpak, and I love my wife.
Right.
But just the time, quantity equals, a lot of goodness.
Yeah.
And so that would help. Say South Columbus. I hear a lot of people saying we want more in South Columbus. Well, I stay a lot in South Columbus because we have 3 plants over there. We have 4 facilities. And so I see a lot of goodness there. And there's a lot of opportunities that people around the country could come here. And if I see that there's value that they could leverage that would help our community and help the people, then I think we ought to be out there trying to sell those things and bring them here.
And it does give people, opportunity. I think back to my wife's aunt, who's since passed, but we took care of her in her older years, and a very important person in my life. But she grew up as a sharecropper, the daughter of sharecroppers in the Delta in Louisiana. First job.
Down around Monroe.
in Monroe, Delhi.
Monroe,
I can't remember the other small towns, but somewhere around the Delhi area. But, being able to go in and work for a boat manufacturer that's no longer there, being able to work for a furniture manufacturer that's no longer there, being able to work at a GM plant and retired from GM is no longer there. She didn't have an opportunity to go to college, but she was able to learn skills, hard work, got a pension, was able to save, buy a house, pay the house off. And those were opportunities that really aren't available to a lot of people anymore. And yes, it's good to see that there's the potential for that. So I agree with you 100%. And even down here, my grandmother worked in the textile mills in the late 30s, early 40s, learning some skills. She worked for Tom's. My dad retired from Tom's, none of which are left anymore. So,
I bought one of their buildings.
Oh, well, we got some activity taken. But
we got a lot of activity in that old bakery on 10th and Casita Road. We got probably 120 people there today.
But I think it's hard for, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I apologize, but I think it's just hard for unless you've touched it, and I had the benefit of being the youngest in an old family, and so I was still able to kind of reach back and through the memories and kind of touch the way that those opportunities really helped lift people out of poverty. And so, man, I just agree 100% with what you were saying.
Yeah, my dad was a General Motors manager, and I was born in Indiana. I moved to Fitzgerald, Georgia, moved to Albany, Georgia, and every plant my dad ever worked in has been mowed over. It's just dirt.
Yeah.
And it all got moved south of the border. My dad retired at age 54 with, 80% of his benefits and his pension. And, 80% of his pay and 100% of his benefits. And, so when I started Ankerpak, my dad said, son, what are you doing? You got 2 kids in private school. I said, well, Dad, they don't have pensions anymore. I don't even have good benefits. Yeah. And I still don't
And
today.
for us, that's a good thing that they don't have pensions anymore. Just
I get it.
Full disclosure.
Well, they're coming back.
We're
They're making a
putting
comeback.
our whole world's on your shoulder. Don't mess up.
Some Fortune 500 companies are bringing back the cash balance pension.
One thing I wanted to say about our future also, we were talking about youth and somehow future generations and baby boomers. I'm real proud. This is one thing I like in business is the relationships that are formed at the job site. And so when I talked about what it does for a community to bring a big manufacturer in, you get people going to work at the same day and they have a family, a work family that they work with. And, I think I shared with you before we started that my son-in-law and daughter came back and they're in the business now. And it's just really fun they have the same passion I have to help formulate those kind of relationships with the people we work with beside every day.
Yep.
And I'm really proud at Ankerpak that now our organizational chart looks different. So we have 4 people. I call them our mentors. They're not executives. They're not, they're our mentors.
Right.
One of them, but they come to work every day. They're the first in, the last out.
Oh.
They're there to help solve the problems. They run to the fires. And then when you got this whole group, maybe about 8 or 10 managers underneath the mentors, and we call them our future leaders.
Okay.
And so when you're growing an economy, that's the supply chain of value add. It's the people that you're lifting up.
Right.
And so we kind of touched on that, but I wanted us, as we're talking about small business, growing manufacturing, seeing what could be. I think Columbus has a lot to offer. We got good quality people. And I would say even on Casita Road, especially on Casita Road. And I'm really proud of our town. I think we have a lot more to offer than we're out really talking about. But it's not all glorious high tech, shiny, lure type items. Some of it's just let's go to work every day and take small baby steps. With consistency.
So is that kind of how you approach the hiring aspect of the business as well? Mm-hmm. Because when you're looking for people to fill certain spots, are you guys immediately thinking, hey, they may be doing this today, but what are they going to be doing in 5 years?
Our whole model. At Ankerpak, I'd have to tell you a lot more about our model, but our model is to take temporaries online and we give them simple tasks. This is the lowest entry level, easiest way to get started is just show up for work every single day. And out of that, we have plant managers, we have machine operators, we have line leaders, we have supervisors. And that's where we start. And most everybody, I'd say 98% of all our employees came in that way because we started from scratch just like you guys did.
Right.
And just pounding the pavement. It was only me and my wife. And then it was me and one person.
Yeah.
And then it was two. And that's how we built it, just one time. So I can walk through 4 different plants and all the employees, and I know most of the people there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because we built together.
Yeah.
And that's the value of bringing those businesses to this town.
I do have to ask a lighter question real quick before we transition. Do you still do the Sharpie markers?
I do manufacture grease pencils, Sharpie grease pencils. The kind, you probably don't know what they are,
Yeah,
but
they
you pull them with a
peel.
string
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
peel
yeah.
them. So, yeah, it takes 7 steps to make one marker, and we make around, I don't know if it's 10 million a year in quantity of markers. So we mix the wax and the pigments, melt
Wow.
it with steam, we mash it out, we extrude it into the core, we wrap it with paper with a string and label it and cut it. We blister package it and we ship it to their distribution center.
Just had to ask.
So, yeah.
If it was the traditional Sharpies, I was going to see if you had the contract with the White House for all the Sharpies they use, because I think they use like
I don't think he uses a grease pencil.
Well, I will
think
tell you
Sharpie
this,
is an actual
our
Sharpie.
newest contract, and we're really happy about this. This is why we bought the Lance building down there. It's 150,000 square feet, and we partnered and started a new service agreement with Uniball. Okay. Uniball is a Japanese manufacturer pen. Every pen is made in Japan. They ship it in containers. It comes to Columbus. Now, any Uniball pen that you buy in America, Mexico, or Canada comes through Columbus, Georgia. Every Uniball pen you buy comes through here. And we do all the packaging, all the retail fulfillment, and all the e-commerce. So any Uniball pen, throw that away.
It was his. It was our producer's. So I'll get rid of it. But sorry to shift there, but I had to ask before we transition.
So you're getting the product in and you're packaging it.
We're getting it in bulk. It's all manufactured over there. So we'll probably get 70 to 100 containers in from Japan. They'll have anywhere from around 1 million pens per container, and we'll touch every one of them. And it'll be touched by us before you buy it.
Well, there you go.
That's great.
Go buy some.
That's great for their.
Go buy some Uniballs. Unless it says Sharpie. Go buy some
Thank
Uniballs.
you very much,
Mr. Producer.
Good
we
job.
have a
We'll keep you
Uniball
on the
pen
payroll.
supporting Columbus.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, I remember years ago seeing Chinese food packaging that came from Columbus. Was that you?
It was not me, but we bought the building.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called Fold Pack, and Fold Pack was a local business founded here in town. A guy from up north came here. He started. I don't know enough about his history. Every building I bought, and we have 4 facilities, and we have around 350,000 square feet, came from a very industrious entrepreneur that built a thriving business, and in most cases got bought out and finally closed down and was left hanging dormant. And we moved into it as an operator. And Fold Pack was a facility that we purchased from, it was then Rock 10, became Westvaco, the big paper manufacturing company, because Rock 10 had bought it, got bought again by Westvaco, and I can tell you stories about how we buy assets, and those are really great stories for entrepreneurs, and kind of the model I see for, you were talking about developing wealth and diversifying your wealth. But yeah, so we're in the old Fold Pack facility, and now that's manufactured by West Rock at another facility.
Solves the riddle for me.
What Chinese products were you buying?
In West Monroe, Louisiana, Eastern.
And you saw Columbus, Georgia?
And it was on the bottom. This was like in 2008 or 9.
Wow.
I was like,
it's wild.
I didn't know this.
That's
And
right.
then,
Every
solves the riddle for me.
when you went to Chinese and you bought your rice and it came in a little folding carton and you open up the top to go, Chinese to go, every one of those cartons came from Columbus, Georgia.
Wow. Okay.
An entrepreneur
Yeah,
there founded the
crazy.
wax-coated process, the building, the machinery, and everything, and then he ended up selling it, and
There we go. Solves the riddle.
Well, that's wild.
Columbus does touch a lot of products that come through
Small
here
world.
and keep going,
Very
has over
small
the
world.
years.
I want to go back to the mentor roles that you were talking about. I think that's so interesting. So as you've built the business, obviously your role has had to change. You wore many hats. Do you still wear many hats? What does your role look like today with the people that you've got at the top and the managers underneath them?
I think I've matured maybe slower than other entrepreneurs. I've been in business 21 years. I've always been a worker. I would tell you my first job, I made $2 an hour and 40-hour work week. I got an $80 check. And I said, Dad, I feel like I'm stealing from Mr. Freeman. He said, son, you must not be working hard enough. So I've always just been an extremely hard worker. And then I drove semi-trucks as an 18-year-old from Albany up to Atlanta. And I've been a driver. I've been a logistics supply chain guy all my life. And so I know how to do that really well. And it took me a lot of years to learn that I can't do all things. And then I thought I'd always work till I was 70 or 80, and I think I will, but it will be an evolved work balance life now because I can feel more tired today than I have just 3 years ago, and I'm 55. So my daily routine has shifted a lot, and I still want and desire to be a good leader. To lead with ideas and some accountability, some direction, some rules, and I think most of our managers at Ankerpak understand that I like to give authority for them to make decisions and give them grace if they mess up.
Yeah.
And I think also there's some parameters there. So, don't let me be too surprised with a mess up.
Right.
Come and give me a little bit of mental preparation. Don't come to me and tell me you lost $1 million. I'm dead. We're all dead. The boat's sinking. Don't come say it's too late. We hit the iceberg. The Titanic's down. It's too late.
Yeah.
So the mentorship thing kind of developed over time, and it wasn't me that started it. It was a gentleman that was 73 years old. His name's Tony. And Tony's just a real special man, and he retired from the textile industry, worked for billionaires. Yeah. And he went home for a while, and he was bored. And he came, somebody introduced him to me, and he said, John, I just want to come to work. I don't like sitting at home. It's not what I've done all my life.
We get that a lot. Yeah.
And I interviewed him, my general manager and I, and we decided, I don't want to hire him. I don't want to. I just didn't. A year goes by. And I got desperate again. I started thinking about things. He said, he was willing. He's probably smarter. He's got some. And I went back. He said, I'm bored out of my mind. And he came to work for us. He was the #1 change agent at Ankerpak. He's worked with us now, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 years, but, when he first came, it was really difficult. And I could tell you a lot of reasons why. But the bottom line is, his wisdom, his experience, his persistence, his consistency, his principles, they were proven over time. And some people would say maybe they were a little old school, but once the employees understood what was expected and how fair he was, how he always would do something, if he asked you to do it, he had already done it.
Right.
And they started trusting him. It changed everything. And I started learning from him. He was the #1 change agent. Then we hired another young guy named Raman. Tony's still with us today. And I don't know this, but I think he's 73. And, when he gets tired, he's going to walk out the door. and it will still have been just such a blessing, #1. Then we had this other young kid named Raman. I call him young kid. He left Egypt. First person in his family to ever leave Cairo, downtown. His family was entrepreneurial. His mama said, you'll never make it. And he made it to America. And he went to CSU for his master's, cybersecurity. Came and said, John, I want to work for you. I said, I can't hold you. You're too smart. I'm not going to hire you. I'd already had 7 other interns. I knew what I was talking to. He said, no. And he had already been accepted to get his PhD at Auburn.
Right.
And he ended up staying. He's been here 5 years. Now he's the #1 change agent at Ankerpak, and he's been here 5 years. So Tony's moved down to #2. Yeah. I suspect soon Tony's going to move to #3. And he knows this. I talked to him about it because
if he doesn't, he does now.
But the fact is, he's proud of that.
Yeah.
He helped develop ramen. He helped develop the next #1.
Right.
And I think that's my job today as a leader in the company is I still got to go to work. I still got to be consistent in certain areas, check reports, do it. I still walk the floor every day. Innovation happens on the plant floor. It doesn't happen in an office on a laptop.
Right.
That's why manufacturing needs to come back to this country because you can't invent products on a laptop and go tell the plant to make them.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the power of delegation.
Yep.
And then still understanding as the key person, the operator, the owner, of being able to get down at the lower levels as the way outsiders would look at it.
Yeah.
Which, that's not, we don't look at it that way as derogatory, say the lower levels, but getting down where the action is happening and getting your hands dirty is important. And I think that obviously does help you make better decisions as the leader.
Well, it helps morale too, because if you start asking the people on the plant floor what they think, not only are they appreciative that you asked, they just might have better ideas than you have and me.
I think that's so underrated.
Oh, it's
because
way
a
underrated.
lot of business owners, they have done the early work in the first few years. They've pounded the pavement. They've done the things to build it, and they feel ownership over that, which, bravo, you definitely should. But a lot of times you can sort of, let go a little bit. You don't have to let go completely, but you can have other people come in and give you their ideas and take those ideas. I think a lot of business owners miss out on that because they feel like they can't give up anything to kind of benefit from that.
And you know best, and you may very well know best to a degree, but that's a large cultural change that hopefully is going to happen. I think it is happening. Is more respect for service workers and hard workers and people that do things with their hands. But just thinking back to some of my family members that drove trucks for their entire life, when the whole movement in the 70s and 80s of, you're not going to even have a career unless you go to college kind of mentality, and everybody floods the schools, and they felt a little element of shame because they felt like society wasn't valuing what they were doing. And I think that's changing. I think that people are seeing that for some people, a 4-year degree and getting $150,000 in debt is not the answer for them. No,
I tell you, I'm really proud when we talk about developing up people on the assets in Columbus and versus the liabilities. Well, this is what I'm thinking. And when I'm thinking as a new person involved in government and politics, the innovation does happen on plant floor. If we could just, even as an operation, as a city operating government, go out and realize what our city workers are dealing with, we might could affect change more positively. And so it can happen at all levels, at supervisory levels, at management levels and accounting. It can happen in all silos and departments. One thing I think is really important too is that there's not this graduation where you're trying to rake the diamonds from the rubble. You're trying to pave a road with it all, and you're trying to work together as a team. And so even the people I've been real proud of the mentors at Ankerpak to be able to take people off the line who had great assets and great skills that we could help them with and encourage them to go and do another job and leave Ankerpak and go do it. Wow. I could tell you stories you've heard. If you went on our website on some of those blogs, you would have seen or read or heard some of the stories of people that have left Ankerpak and made wonderful lives that started at those entry-level spots. So that's something we're proud of.
I'd like to touch on something real quick. What would you say, because you brought up something very interesting in taking that mentality of being on the plant floor and getting where the action's happening and getting that feedback and getting refreshed as to what the processes are, what's working, what's not working. Taking that same mindset to government, what would you say to critics of business owners and successful people that decide to get involved in government? What would you say to a lot of the critics that are out there that think it's just something untoward or something
to
selfish?
Get involved
in government, and then taking what benefit, I guess, other than what we've already talked about, would you say that business people bring to government?
Yeah.
That's a good question. They're so different.
Yeah, they are. I'll just say that right now I'm so new in the city government and it's been such a kind of a muddy mess, in my opinion. I'm willing to do it because I'm consistent, I'm able, I want to, I'm idealistic, and I think I can affect positive change, maybe by asking some of the hard questions or the right questions to try to get other people to come up with ideas. I can apply my principles that my daddy brought me up with and that I've learned through my experiences in business of managing hard points and, like you said, pounding the pavement. I think I can bring that to the table. And I would say that I would like to encourage people, please encourage somebody else to be in politics. Because if I say, please go join, if you are listening to this podcast, please go get activated, get knowledgeable about what's happening and get engaged. And then if I said to somebody, go run, they're not just going to do it on themselves. They're not going to raise their hand and say, okay, I'll go do it. I'm inspired. I'm going to go do it because you said so. Most people will only do it if they're asked to do it. And if you will ask a friend, please do this for us. Maybe you can't, but you could ask a friend. We need good, smart-minded business people to apply some of those principles. And, I would just talk about our budget in our city government. I mean, anytime we talked about taxes, and I want more businesses paying their fair share of taxes than less businesses paying more. And if we're spending more money than we're taking in, that's not a sustainable plan.
Right.
It's not.
And the only way they feel like we can, I was told this the other day, and I think there's some truth to it, because I was so frustrated with our budget. We've raised our budget $28 million over last year's city budget. And our economy is not growing in revenue, so we're going to borrow that from savings, cash flow, cash on hand. That's a dangerous place to get into if you ever have a rainy day. Yeah. And so I think the business mind would not do that, and would ask harder questions, and would approach the budget differently. So I think it's very important that wealth managers, manufacturers, transportation, HR people that understand the difficulties. Government's different than business. They keep telling me that. Yeah. But I don't think it's that hard to look at things fresh. And innovation happens on the plant floor. So we need somebody who's trying to positively affect change to go out. And I want to do that. That's why I went to the prison just now with the sheriff. I want to see, feel, and touch, and hear from the deputies in the jail to see how bad it really is. And
so I think it's about taking those principles that make organizations work, and even into your personal life work, and generously giving that service to the community to try to make it better. And I think that's something we all would benefit from.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate
like
you mentioned the fact that it's a little bit muddy. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that's maybe a barrier for a lot of people. Like I'm running my own business. I'm doing my own thing. Do I wish the permitting process and all these kind of things we have to go through with the city were easier? Absolutely. Right. But do I really want to take my time away from it? So, I mean, it's a good question, because there has to be a balance that's reached. It's just, how much effort are you willing to put forward?
Well, I would really try to encourage you. Because my wife didn't want me to do it. She told me no before. Everybody thinks maybe John set this up, that he got appointed. Yeah. It was not a setup. It happened overnight. We could talk a whole nother podcast about that. But, my wife told me no. And so I stepped out in the hall, and 2 minutes later, she finally relented and said, okay. And I accepted the nomination. But I really would like to tell people, it is hard. Yeah. It is not something I wanted to do. My wife didn't want me to do it, but I am going to do it because I don't know what's in me. I want to drive. And now all of a sudden, I think we're forming we're asking the right questions to each other, at least on council. There's a group of counselors, and I like all the counselors. Yeah. But there's some of us that are more open-minded and able to talk to each other and come up with compromise and solutions. So it is possible to do better. And if you can show a little bit of increase and listen and learn and impact positive change, it's going to help your kids. It's going to help your business. It's going to help your regulation and taxes. It's going to help us recruit. It's going to help us have a better united community. I like our diversified community and where we came from. And it's not all glorious, but I wouldn't take anything away from even our hardships in our town. Yeah. We continue to improve on it.
Yeah. That's a good point. We're coming up on our time here, so we want to be respectful of that. But one last thing I would say is, have you ever found yourself in a position where you got some really good advice from somebody? And what advice would you pass on to somebody who's maybe starting to think about getting into their own business, or maybe in the first few years it's tough, they're kind of making the grind, they're doing the dirty work, and where does this go from here? Should I even continue? What would you say to that type of person?
I remember I was sitting in a Burger King in Americus, Georgia. I was a sales guy, and I was dreaming about my own business. And I asked an entrepreneur that I just knew. And he said, John, I've talked more people out of starting their business than I've talked them into starting it. And really, he literally was trying to talk me out of starting the business. And it did scare me. And I remember that moment. That's why I remember it. It scared me. But it didn't stop me. And so some of the best advice, it wasn't even the advice he was giving, it was the tone and the seriousness of how hard it was and what I was going to go through, and how he was serious that, John, I'd tell you, turn around and run back. And, I read a book called The Dream Giver by I think it was Bruce Wilkerson, and just talked about the land. There was a man named Nobody, because everybody always told him, no, you can't do that. And he lived in a land of familiar. And there were all these border bullies, and the giants of the land, when he was trying to get out, they were all telling him, don't go away. You can't start that business. Come back. You need to go work over there for the rest of your life. So everybody was telling him no. Well, that guy told me no too. And it stood out to me, and it was really good advice, because I had to do a check with myself to see, can I go pound the pavement at 23? Am I willing to fail on my own and be embarrassed? Or do I think I can stand the test of time and get to where you've got as a wealth management and raise 3 kids and still struggle every day to keep raising the bar and pushing forward? So I think good advice doesn't come in words. Sometimes it comes in tone and sincerity. Yeah. And I took something that was meant negative, and it inspired me.
That's awesome.
So I think as a small business, if you can be inspired and believe in what you want to try to do, even if you fail, if you believe in it and your wife's with you, you can make it.
Yeah, support systems are important.
Right. Is your wife still on board?
I think so. I'll have to check after this, but I think
we'll shoot a text message.
I think she is.
John,
by the way,
it's been great.
I've never seen anybody with 2 different color eyes. That's pretty cool.
1 in a million.
That's awesome. Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, well, John, we appreciate this.
I look forward to hearing the rest of your story.
I'll shake your hand kind of awkwardly, but we appreciate you coming on, and I hope you'll come back eventually, and we can maybe talk about something else. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. I can't wait to get involved and hear more small businesses, and this is going to be exciting.
That's the goal. Thank you. I appreciate it.